Hey, what's going on, everyone? Christian from Radius, and today we are talking about a contingency reserve. All right. So a contingency reserve, basically, this applies to renovation loans, but most importantly, or most commonly, FHA 203k renovation loans. All right. So we're going to talk all about the contingency reserve today. So first of all, what is it? The contingency reserve is just like it sounds. It's a reserve of money that protects both the buyer and the lender, right? So a lot of times what happens during these renovation loans, once the actual construction starts on the property, you start ripping down walls and things like that, ripping up floors, you start to run into issues, right? Issues that were not seen during the home inspection or during the contractor's walkthrough of the property. So this contingency reserve is basically a pool of money set aside. Just like I said, it's going to protect the buyer and the lender. So it's going to protect the buyer in the instance that you rip down some walls and you find that there's mold damage in there, or termites or something like that. You've got an extra pot of money set aside so the contractor can fix those issues. Now also, it protects the lender as well, because we want, when we do these renovation loans and we finance the cost of the renovations, we want a perfectly good house at the end of it, at the end of the process, right? We don't want to run into issues and not be able to fix it, right? So that's what the contingency reserve is. All right, moving on. How much? It can be anywhere from 10 to 20% of the rehab amount. And this comes down to how much work are you doing on the property. So we'll get into it in a minute, who decides on this, but just know that the contingency reserve can be anywhere from 10%, 15%, 20% of the rehab amount. So for example, if you're buying a $100,000 property and you're putting $100,000 into it, and the contingency reserve has to be $20,000, has to be 20%, that would be $20,000, right? Because the contingency reserve needs to be 20%. You're doing $100,000 worth of renovations, so that contingency reserve would be 20%. Doesn't have anything to do with the purchase price, just has to do with the rehab amount. All right, so next, who decides this? Ultimately, whether we're going to do 10, 15, or 20% of the contingency reserve, ultimately it is up to the underwriter. However, the HUD consultant can suggest what he or she thinks the contingency reserve should be set at. All right, but ultimately it is the underwriter's discretion. All right. So what happens with leftover funds? So this is a good thing, right? Let's say you have a contingency reserve of $20,000, right? You go through the whole construction of the property. You don't run into any issues whatsoever. The contractor doesn't go over budget at all, and the numbers come in perfect, right? So you have this $20,000 in a contingency reserve. So what do you do with it? Well, there's a couple different things you can do with it. The first one is principal reduction. So this is basically the go-to, right? This is what this is like the standard. So we'll take that $20,000 and we'll pay down your mortgage, we'll pay down your loan with that $20,000, right? Now what you can also do is you can do other projects. So let's say you have that $20,000, you're just about at the end of the construction phase, the home is just about done, and you talk to the HUD consultant or the inspector and you say, hey, we have this $20,000 contingency reserve and we'd like to add a washer dryer hookup in the basement so we can, and then we'd like to buy a laundry machine, a laundry, washing machine and a dryer, and use that $20,000 to do that. That is acceptable as long as the consultant signs off on it. So you can use that contingency reserve to do other projects. You just can't go to Vegas and put it all on. We're not going to give you a blank check and say, good luck, head out to Vegas, put it all on black, and hope you win. So that's what happens with the leftover funds. And then the last part right here, the contingency reserve can be financed, right? So 9 times out of 10, 99.9% of the time, people want to finance this contingency reserve. However, you can pay for it in cash at the closing, right? Let's say your contingency reserve is $20,000 and you don't want to finance it, you want to pay for it out of pocket. You can pay that $20,000 in cash. And the reason why I bring that up is back to this leftover funds principle. If you do pay the contingency reserve in cash, you don't finance it, and the project doesn't go over budget, you can take that $20,000 back as a check, right? That's the only time that you can do that. I don't really want to spend too much time on it because honestly, most people will finance the contingency reserve into the actual loan amount. So that's a brief overview of contingency reserve and how it's applied, some of the big things about it. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. And yeah, I hope this helps. See ya.